Hi, guys. Scott Jones. Welcome to another edition of The Truth About Addiction and Recovery. I knew I was going to get that sooner or later. I screwed up our intro about 4 times there. But you know what? We're not perfect. We're not perfect. But we are talking about the truth. And the truth is that there's good and there's bad. There's all sorts of things out there. And that's why I wanted to talk to one of the straight shooters I know. And that is Lyle Fried. And Lyle, you were with Transformations Treatment Center, right?
Correct.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for coming down.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a trek. You're up in what area?
Port St. Lucie, so about an hour, a little hour and 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What do you do in the car when you're driving all that time?
I listen to teachings mostly.
Do you really?
Yeah, and make phone calls between the two. Yeah.
No music? You're not a music kind
No,
of?
I love music. I love music.
Okay, all right.
But I listen to music in the morning getting ready, and then I use drive time for teachings.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Enough personal stuff. Let's talk about addiction.
Okay.
No, really, first let's get straight into it. Very strange times we have going on right now.
No doubt.
Between the protesting and unfortunately some of the subsequent riots that are going on, the COVID crisis, the quarantines, even the political climate, not knowing what's going to happen with healthcare and everything else, this is having a real impact on the treatment of addiction, isn't it?
It's having an impact not only on the treatment, but access to care, on the level of needs. So we've seen, we know from this time last year that we have 4 times the amount of anxiety and depression diagnoses coming out, people expressing those issues, and yet we have restricted access to care for it. So while the need is at its greatest ever, and it had been growing anyway, access to care has diminished, and then people willing to seek care has diminished, despite the fact that they're saying they need care more than ever.
Yeah. Now, I know there's probably some correlation between the COVID and the inability, people not wanting to seek out care, which is actually, it's kind of funny because you actually have more protections in treatment centers than you do out on the streets or at home.
Correct. If it's done right, and most of them these days are, at least the ones that I've visited with, there's so many protections in place. It's like any other medical environment. Temperature checks, the quarantine issues, everything's in place to protect the patient and the staff. Masks are being worn, social distancing being done. So where you used to have groups in treatment are now dispersed throughout buildings and smaller groups and individual rooms. So people who used to be going into a shared room for inpatient treatment are now getting individual single rooms. And so all the things are being done to protect them. But there's that fear, and then of course, there's the travel to get there. If you're coming from out of state, you got to get on an airplane, and people are afraid to fly.
Yeah. The flying, I get the flying thing. I get that. Mm-hmm. I've had family members who have had to fly during this, and it's a bit nerve-wracking. But yeah, but in actuality, you're right. I mean, there's a lot that's going on. They're taking care of with the temperatures and everything else. But the unfortunate truth is, it's still another excuse for people not to go to treatment. And I say the word excuse tongue-in-cheek because it's not a good excuse, but it's an excuse. And people are not getting into treatment, and overdoses and incidences of alcoholism and drug addiction are increasing in metropolitan areas by as much as 52%.
Yeah, everywhere. I was just talking with the Florida Department of Health the other day, getting stats from them.
Oh, good.
On increases in overdoses, Narcan use for first responders. Just all the things going on out there and what we're seeing in emergency departments. And so the needs are definitely going up. We're seeing more incidences, which is interesting. People are saying it's harder to access drugs these days because of all of this, restricted travel and whatnot. But yet they're still finding it, they're still doing it. And the people who had been in recovery, there's a higher rate of relapse right now too. They don't have access to their meetings and their support networks.
Right. And I know there's a lot of Zoom going on, but it's not it's a good substitute, but it's not a great substitute.
It's not the same.
To miss that fellowship and, the contact, the sitting down, having the coffee, the hugs, all of that stuff is very important.
That one-on-one, that eyeball-to-eyeball contact and accountability that we get from those, that's one of the biggest values of that community-based kind of recovery.
Right.
And that community-based approach is that accountability and community. So when you lose that, and give you an example, I had a guy call me, he's out west, and he was in a recovery program, he's in an IOP, and he's texting me, and I said, what are you up to? And he says, well, I'm in an IOP group. I go, well, no, you're not. You're texting me. You can't be in that group and talking to me at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. It's really, you don't have to hide in the back row anymore. You could actually just put a cardboard cutout of your face in front of the camera and then just go watch a movie, right?
Yeah.
They're texting. So I mean, we're laughing about it, but it's a serious situation.
Yeah.
And thank goodness there are some people that are getting help. And I've been around a few places, as you have, we've seen, recovery is still there and available. So we just need people to wake up and go get it. Now, you were mentioning that you were talking about first responders and different people like that. You have a real connection to all of that, don't you?
Sure. Well, I come from a family full of first responders, my wife included. My niece is still active, but I also work for Help for Our Heroes, which is a first responder specific program run by first responders who are now master's level clinicians. And I also work with the state on the first responder task force, looking to find ways to support gaps in coverage need or access, and trying to figure out how to help themselves as much as possible. So those keep me pretty well tied into that community. It's definitely a heartstring, that I see the need. And it's also proof that none of us are immune. I mean, you're talking about people who deal with this on a day in and day out basis, and the levels of trauma and stress that they're exposed to are pretty severe. And we tend to take that for granted.
Well, I don't think sometimes it's not even a thought. I mean, because if you're not in that position, when you're looking at it from the outside, you think, hey, the greatest thing in the world, be a hero. Unfortunately, what people don't see is the trauma that they have to deal with on a daily basis that gets compounded on a daily basis.
It's not like TV.
No, no, it's not. It's not. It's not like you go out there, without being graphic. I mean, you could see a lot of death and destruction and loss, and people who lose everything, and you've got to stare them in the eye and deal with this. And it's not like on TV where they all go back to the station house and play cards and have hot dogs and everything's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine there's a lot of torture that's going on within these people.
Well, just we're all humans, and so as I've worked with veterans for 20 years as well, and we know that they go through horrific things. The rate of suicide attempts, the rate of depression, the rate of PTSI or PTSS, the post-traumatic stress that they face and deal with is really unheard of to the average human being. We all have forms of trauma we may deal with, but to deal with it repeatedly over and over again, you just don't understand. And there's a breaking point. It's sort of like you get hit a little here and there, and maybe you are a tough guy, and maybe you can handle it. But over a period of time, that becomes more and more sensitive, and finally, there's a point at which you really need to do something about it. They're getting better now at developing programs for. We talked about critical incident stress management and some peer groups and things like that. But then there's also that mentality among first responders that we are supposed to be tough guys. We're supposed to be able to endure all of this and suck it up, Francis, and keep moving. Unfortunately, that's why the suicide rates are so high. You really need to deal with it.
I don't think people understand the gravity of this. More firefighters die. At least this was a number a year and a half ago. I didn't get 2020 numbers yet, but more firefighters died by suicide than in the line of duty, than in action. And I think people would be shocked by that.
Yeah.
And of those suicides, there was a great percentage, and I believe it was 55, I could be wrong, it might be 58% of those, was attributed to alcohol and drugs in some way or another.
Or vice versa. So, you turn to the self-medication. So there's, again, that underlying trauma issue, and you deal with it the way you know how. And again, you see, take any show on TV, and this is where they do get it right. You see the cops at the end of a long shift. What do they all do? They all go to the bar.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's that mentality, and it's changing. It's an interesting group because they are both very healthy. They have to be physically fit for their job. So they're both very healthy, but again, we've never really taught them until recently how to really care for the whole being. And that includes here and here. It's not just how much you can bench press or how far you can run, right? It's how healthy are you as a whole person. And that includes how you process the stuff that you're exposed to, how you're able to deal with that, how you're able to recognize your own symptoms for depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And then you get the end of career thing where their whole identity has been wrapped up in this. And now as they wind down their career and they get ready for retirement, that identity is taken away. Now, who am I? What do I do? And what is life about?
Yes, we've seen this in the military, and some people probably have more of a understanding of somebody coming back from across seas, and they come home and they have a hard time adapting and adjusting and figuring out where their place is. But it happens with first responders just as much, doesn't it?
Sure. You've been trained to do something, and it's been your identity. So, for the soldier example, I had a friend who was a special forces guy. He lives up in Georgia now. He says, I was trained and very good at what I did. Unfortunately, there was no real market for someone to come back and legally kill people in the United States. So I didn't know what to do with myself.
Did he try Jersey? I'm just saying.
But you get the idea.
Yeah.
You're trained for a specific type of life and environment and identity, but it doesn't really translate outside of that. And imagine the firefighter or the law enforcement officer who then goes home and now he's a dad, right? And so we tend to, particularly in today's climate, look at law enforcement in particular very negatively. You got to remember, they're humans too. And they're dealing, I just met with a really nice guy. He's a black officer out of the DC area, and his heart for people was one of the cleanest and purest I've ever seen. But you got to understand his job, what he's got to deal with.
Right.
He can't wear that on his sleeve out there.
Yeah.
Or he'll get taken out.
It's insane. It's insane. But I had heard something about one department pushing for more psychological evaluations for officers, and they were looking to get them at least once a year. And I'm thinking in my head, to do a job like that, it's insane not to be doing these things almost monthly. You need people to look out for each other.
You do
at this point,
but you also need an understanding from the top down that this is a good thing and not a bad thing. In other words, you have, like in New York, they have the red flag law.
Yeah.
So if there's any little tick, they have an evaluation that doesn't come back wonderful, their service revolver is taken away. They're no longer able to carry a weapon. Well, they're an officer of the law. How are they going to do that? Right. So now they're again, you've taken away their identity. So if they even admit that there's an issue that they want to deal with, they're taken out of their role, which further compounds the issue, and they're put at a desk, which is not what they signed up for.
I think part of that is there's got to be a normalization of it's okay to have a problem. And if you come forward, we're gonna put you on a desk for a couple of weeks while we deal with this problem. But it's not. There's this stigma attached to it, and it feels like the loss of identity because we haven't normalized the fact that you're gonna be going through issues and you need help.
Well, and that's the deal. So there's a chief up in the Orlando area who did a real good thing. He put out a video and said, "I needed help." He gets it, right? We have a fire chief who works with us and talks about his experience, and he tells people, listen, I was the chief and I needed to get help. We've had other officers and other veterans who come through, and those kind of voices are helpful. But again, you need to have that understanding through the whole culture of the department, or they're never going to seek the help, even if they know they need it, because their fear of retribution, losing their job, et cetera. The truth is, everybody in the world can do well with counseling, right?
Right.
We talk in the treatment world, we talk that 12 steps have some great application, whether you've ever picked up a drink or not, right? There's some good life tools in there, right?
Right.
Well, the same thing is true for everybody. So if we don't start to recognize, again, from the top down and give them permission and even encourage them to at least maintain their well-being.
Yes, absolutely. There's been change in society towards the thinking about addiction and even mental health. There's been a change in society. We could look at Hollywood, for example. I'm sure you can't get a starring movie role unless you've gone to rehab 3 times. But I make light, but it's become more, okay, yeah, well, they had a drinking problem, then they stopped, or they had a drug problem, then they stopped. And it's become more normalized, where it wouldn't have been 25 years ago or 30 years ago.
Right.
So hopefully some of that acceptance, and it's okay to have issues, will bleed over into some of these other areas.
And it is. It's getting there.
But we put these people up as heroes.
Right.
And I think that, that moniker is as much a curse as it is a blessing for the individual.
No doubt. Yeah. It requires them to have a certain mentality and put up a certain veneer that is, unfortunately, can be fragile.
So are there issues when it comes to treatment? Now, we're talking about the Help for Heroes program that you have, and that's part of Transformations.
Correct.
Okay. So why is it necessary to have that? I mean, and I'm asking as a person who's not in the first responder service, although I know people who are, But why do they need that special program as opposed to just going in mainstream programming?
Sure. Well, we have many specialized programs, and part of it is that everybody is different and experiences are different.
Sure.
So, we have a Christian program, we have a Glatt kosher Jewish program, we have the LGBTQ program, because they have unique sort of cultures within them, right?
Yes.
Each one of those are a culture issue. Well, so are first responders and veterans. They have their own culture. So imagine, for instance, that you were the law enforcement officer who reported to the scene and ended up having to arrest this person. And next to you is that fire rescue individual who had to resuscitate that individual and Narcan them. And then you guys had some trauma. And you come in to get some help, but in the same group as that guy that you just locked up last week, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So not only that, but again, their experiences are unique. Okay.
Okay.
So in order for someone to treat them, it's best to have someone who's walked in those shoes. If you want a combat veteran to really get help for what he experienced in combat, there's nobody's going to understand it as well as another combat veteran who's been there, done that, and made it out the other side. The same thing is true with law enforcement and fire rescue and corrections and dispatch. They all have unique sets of experiences that is a culture unto itself, and people who have been in that culture understand it better than anybody.
I think I'm glad you answered it that way, because that's what I was thinking as well. And I think it's interesting for people to understand. If you cannot speak someone's language, you cannot communicate with them.
Correct.
If you cannot see, at least maybe have a better understanding of what they see through their eyes and what their culture is, you can't help them. So it's important that we have these things.
Sure. And when I was working as a clinician, and I've done that for close to 20 years now, and it's a horrible question, but I get it. So often I would have a patient ask me, "Are you in recovery?" Well, the answer is yes, but the answer also is it shouldn't matter, but it does. They want to know that I know what they're going through. They want to know that I understand. Now, I do believe that there are some very high quality clinicians that can help them that have never been in recovery, never needed to be in recovery. But the fact of the matter is there's a trust level and an understanding that happens when you're working with somebody who has been there.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what you'll find is that a lot of those times the clients will question that at the beginning of the relationship. But if you build the relationship and they see that you're helping them, it no longer becomes an issue. But at the beginning, it's just another way of throwing up walls. Well, if you didn't walk in my shoes, you can't understand me. I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah.
So,
and you hear that a lot, particularly from the combat veterans. They'll even tell other ex-military, "You weren't in combat, you don't understand."
yes. And I've seen that firsthand working in treatment and dealing with somebody who came back with extreme trauma from combat situations. And though I could build a certain amount of rapport with this person, there was always that kind of block that was going on that, he was actually able to verbalize. I could tell you these things, but I just can't explain anything that would make that look on your face go away once I tell you what I've done. Yeah. And that becomes a huge obstacle.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have to justify their existence. So by having people who understand how they've lived and what they've done, they don't have to go through that justification, and they can get to work on the trauma, on the mental health, and on the addiction.
Absolutely. And there's even a language that goes with it, right?
Oh, yeah.
We know that you go into a 12-step room and we have a language we use, right? We say things and it means something that someone else, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
Well, the same thing exists with veterans and first responders. They have a language of their own as well. So there's a way of communicating that's going to make sense. It's going to feel at home, and you're going to be more relaxed and able to express yourself better.
Yeah. I mean, you walk into some rooms, you say easy does it, and they're thinking that's how you want your eggs.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is. So,
Right.
You're right. There is a language, there's a culture. So, I'm glad we're talking about this. And if they want to get some information from you or from Transformations, specifically about that program or anything that goes on at Transformations, how do they get a hold of you guys?
Well, the easiest way is to call us at 844, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. It's 888-919-2619. Of course, you can always reach me directly, and my cell phone is 772-332-8711. We have, and I'd be happy if anybody wants to reach out to me and just text me or whatever. I'll send web links that give them details of whichever portion of it is most applicable to them.
So those phone numbers are on the screen. If you're listening to the audio, then again, the direct line to Transformations, 888-919-2619, 888-919-2619. And you can go to their website as well, of
Correct.
course.
Yes.
Do you happen to know what that is offhand?
Transformationstreatment.com.
Well, that was very simple. Transformationstreatment.com. Again, the information is on your screen, so check it out. And, you guys invite people to ask questions, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we can't cover everything here. We can't answer all these questions.
No.
There's so much going on. Let me ask you personally, how's it been for you and your family with the crisis and everything that's been going on? Have you had to make a lot of adjustments to how you do things?
Sure. I mean, a lot more remote work, obviously. I'm about zoomed out at this point.
I'm not a fan. I mean, here I am doing a podcast. Not a fan of Zoom.
And just so you know, we even have a telehealth platform we developed. So that's been one of my roles, is to help roll out a telehealth approach, because a lot of people aren't able to or won't come into services or don't need that high a level, but they want to do their either psych evals or medication management or counseling from home, because they don't want to get out and expose themselves. So we've made that available through a branch we call Freedom Now, which is an outpatient clinic. And you can reach all that through us as well. So that's one thing, is adjusting to, how to reach people where they are and understanding their hesitancies and still get them the help they need. The other has obviously been figuring out, most of my job traditionally had been traveling around the country and teaching.
Right.
I'm not doing that anymore. I haven't done that for a year. It's been just over a year since I've traveled anywhere, and I used to go 2 locations a month and teach. That really changed gears a lot. So it's more now just learning how to find people where they are, let them know what's going on, and give them options to get well, and learning what people's needs are. And those needs are ever changing. So like with the task force, we've got a survey going out through the state to all the first responders in the state, trying to figure out where are they in this. We built this because in March we recognized the added pressures on them with COVID. Now they've got stresses and strains where they've got to be worried about exposure for themselves and their family. And and then of course the world is now at this point of economic uncertainty. Are we going to have a job? And so, and that all rides with all of us. So, it's adapting and learning, and really it's me learning new self-care as much as anything, how to make sure that I stay healthy enough to help others.
Well, let me ask you a question, Lyle, and I like to ask this of all of my guests. How long have you been working in addiction and around addiction field? Yeah.
Started in 99, took a break, started again in 2002, and haven't stopped since.
Okay, so that's quite a few years.
Yeah.
You've got 22, 23 years in doing this. You had to have mornings where you wake up and say, why the hell am I doing this?
Several times
What keeps
a
you
year.
going?
Well, I do threaten to quit and sell solar panels on a regular basis, but what keeps me going are those phone calls. Hey, Lyle, I just want to let you know you changed my life. Hearing that somebody's doing well. We've got a young lady we served that's getting ready to get married next month and then next year, and I'm going to be performing the wedding. And so these just seeing the restored families, restored lives, and renewed lives, it really does keep me going. Knowing that there's still needs out there and that I have an ability to help people. And listen, I I really gave away a business to get into this. When I went into treatment myself, I said, hey, this helping people is a pretty cool thing.
Right.
I don't make the money I used to make, but I tell you what, I sleep better and I feel better about what I do.
Yeah, and we do suffer loss when we're working in this.
Yeah.
More than we should, certainly. But the wins are huge.
Yeah.
And for every win, it's somebody's mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter. It's somebody important. So every win is hugely important. And I'm glad you get to experience those things.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It does. It is the fuel that keeps us going.
There we go. So check out transformationstreatment.com. Give them a call again at 888-919-2619. Lyle, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
You're watching The Truth About Addiction and Recovery right here on the ATC Network on YouTube. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. We'll catch you next time.